the hearing of the for the Barnstable Conservation Commission. We would like to ask George to do a roll call for the quorum purpose.
Abadili. Foster.
Present.
Gilmore present. Hearn.
Present.
Lee.
Present.
Moran.
Present.
Sam Pope. Present. Administrator Darcy Carley.
Present.
Staff member Kim Kavanaugh.
Present.
We have a full house, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Acting under the provisions of Mass General Law, Chapter 131, Section 40, and or Chapter 237 of the Code of Town of Barnstable, the Barnstable Conservation Commission will hold a public hearing on Tuesday, October the 11th, 2022, at 6:30 p.m. on the application of Gerald M. and Beth H. Blaze, John P. and Don M. McAuliffe, Christian Camp Meeting Associations, Kurt Steincrest, Trustees, 115 Shore Drive West Realty Trust, 771 SVA LLC. The hearing will be held remotely as televised on Channel 18. The plans and application are on file and may be reviewed by scheduling an appointment by sending an email request to Darcy Curley at 230 South Street, Hyannis. This meeting is being recorded and transmitted by the Information Technology Department of Town of Barnstable on Channel 18. Under Mass General Law, Chapter 38, Section 20, anyone else desiring to make a recording or transmissions, please let Channel 18 know. Hearing none. Tonight's hearing agenda is posted on the town's website. On the agenda next to each application is the amount owed to the Town of Barnstable for the cost of advertisement. Please send your checks to Conservation Division at 230 South Street before the hearing. Remote participation. The Conservation Commission's public hearing will be held by remote participation as a result of an act extending certain COVID-19 measures adopted during the state of emergency, signed up by the Lieutenant Governor on July 16, 2022, suspending certain provisions of the old meeting law. Remote public access to this hearing shall be provided in the following manner. 1. The hearing will be televised by Channel 18. Second, the real-time public comment can be addressed to the Conservation Commission utilizing the Zoom link 839-6829-8945 or use the toll-free phone number 888-475-4499 as shown on the agenda. Third, the public can also email their comments to darcy.curley at town.barnstable.ma.us at least 8 hours prior to the hearing. Tonight, we have one RDA, Gerald M. and Beth H. Blaze proposed a soccer pool and spa at 47 Carrier Way, Craigville Lane, Austin, as shown on the assessors map 141 Parcel 098002. John.
Good evening, John O'Day from Sullivan Engineering Consulting, representing the Blazes. A little over an acre parcel of land in Osterville off of Calouette. I can bring up the plan. Our resource here is flood zone. We are in a mapped flood zone. Project proposes to install some precast a soak pool and the spa. It's in the lawn outside the walkout level. No grading, no filling. Area actually won't flood in the 100-year storm based on the grading. Existing contours out there, but we're mapped in the zone nonetheless. And so we have filed this RDA. Be happy to answer any questions.
Question from the commissioner. Anyone? No one. We have one email from the abutter, and it was mentioning about the correct contact information and so forth, but she does not have any other comment related to this project. Is that abutter available on site here? Let me see.
Yeah. Yes.
Yeah. Go ahead.
Julie May. Yeah, our property is 523 Main Street in Osterville. And it's 141098001. And we just received very late notice of this because the certified mail didn't get to me. We have very strange mail around here, so I heard about it today. But I just wanted to see the plan. It was very hard for me to see it with the email that I had. And I own this co-jointly with our daughter. And is there any way to put her name onto mailings that come out? Do I need to go to the contact the assessor's office? Is that ever done, or does it only go to one address of record? Does anyone know?
No, I think you have asked it correct. You can go and change your address for contact information from the assessor's
Assessors,
office.
yeah. You have
But
to
it's all-
contact them with how you would like that set up.
Okay,
Right.
but it's only one. Well, I'll find out from them.
I don't know.
Okay.
then. Sorry.
But we are thinking perhaps in the future we might want to do something. So we wanted to be aware of what's going on with this, so we could perhaps learn from it.
Well,
Never hurts to know more.
Well,
So-
welcome. Make sure that you have a correct address from the assessor, so that in the future, if any one of your butter apply for any projects, you can get notifications.
Well, thank you very much.
Okay.
Thank you for letting me be here tonight. I appreciate that.
Tom, Pete has his hand up.
Yeah, I'm seeing that.
Okay, one thing, I've got a bad internet connection, so I'm going to go off of video so my speech will be better. I'm a bit ignorant as to what soak pools might be and or a spa. My question is, and it's based upon ignorance, do we need a drawdown pool? Is this a large amount of water that we need to worry about?
So they're basically both the size of a hot tub, and we don't have any wetlands within which we're within a buffer to. So I don't have a great concern over it. I don't know what the downspouts on the house going to that it would be, but I mean, if they just pump this onto lawn without thinking about it, it would flow back into their house before it went into out to a wetland anywhere.
Okay,
So it's up to you. I don't.
I'm good,
see
but
this place being big.
that's
You really don't need it, Peter, for this.
okay. I'm fine.
If you look at the grade from 12, 11, and 10 was the house. So if there's a problem, I think they would put something in there to protect themselves.
Right.
Any other comment from the commissioner? None? I've mentioned about the other, any other public comment, channel 18?
Seeing none.
None? Could I have a motion to approve this project as a negative determination?
Second,
Roll call.
Kern,
Aye.
Lee,
Aye.
Moran,
Aye.
Sampo,
aye.
Avili,
Aye.
Foster,
Aye.
Gilmore, aye. That is unanimous, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Good luck. We have 4 NOI tonight. The first one is John P. and Don M. McCullough. Proposed construction of a pool with pool apron, spa, retaining wall, and fence associated accessory to an existing single-family dwelling at 16 Cove Island Road, Centerville, as shown on the assessors map 187 parcel 54. Lynn Hamlin. Hi, Lynn.
Hi, good evening. Lynn Hamlin representing the applicants. I am going to try to share my screen. Didn't go well last time. Not gonna go well this time either. There, can you see that?
No,
Yeah.
No. Well, maybe I totally messed it up. Oh dear.
I can bring the plan up. You just tell me when, if you want me to do it.
Let me try it this way. You know what? I'm not going to waste your time because apparently I don't know how to do this. So my Mac just isn't cooperative. So maybe Darcy could do it and I will hold you up.
Let me just grab it.
And I'll yabber at you while she gets that done. This project is for a proposed pool and accessory structures, the pool apron, a spa, retaining wall, and a fence. This pool underwent many redesigns in the applicant shoreline pool and myself collaborating, our goal was to move it as far away from the resource areas as possible for minimal impact. You see on the plan, there's a BVW. There's a flood zone, a land subject to coastal storm flowage, and there's the river, which was identified as a river because it shows as perennial on the USGS quad sheet. The work is entirely outside of the 100 buffer zone to the BVW. It's outside of the floodplain, and it just falls within the outer riparian zone of the riverfront. What we did is we located the edge of the original fill for the house construction, which is, if you're out there, is pretty evident. And we tried to locate the pool within the pre-existing disturbed area as much as possible. That is translated into more of a cost to the applicant because you have to build an 8-foot tall retaining wall to level out the area versus building it in the lower part of the property. But then that would locate it within the 100-foot buffer zone and within the inner riparian zone. So this is the design that they went with. We analyze this as redevelopment in the riverfront. It conforms to those standards in that it's located further away from the river than the existing construction. The existing construction is 124 feet from the edge of the river. And this construction at its closest is 158 feet. I'm going to throw some numbers at you. The proposed construction entails 2,028 square feet. Of that, 1,271 square feet are located within existing lawn area. And the regulations exempt conversion of lawn to pool or accessory structures from having to comply with riverfront regulations. So the remaining area is 757 square feet. And of that, we're up to 757 square feet is being mitigated according to the redevelopment regulations at a 2-to-1 ratio, excuse me. And maybe Darcy could bring up my landscape sketch.
Oh, I'm sorry. I only had the plan, but
Oh, well, I'll just explain it. And I'm pointing my cursor on your plan, which you can't see. I'll never get used to this. But if you stood on the hill there, excuse me, and you gazed out towards the river, there's a very distinct swath that was historically cut. The McCulloughs have just owned this property, I think since 2019. And they were cut on the long list of everybody who wanted a pool after COVID hit. So this is why it's dragged for a bit for them. But if you stand on that hill, there's an obvious swath where previous owners took out the overstory. So what we're doing is mitigation, is putting some native trees back in the 100-foot buffer zone location to restore the canopy that was removed. And you probably have a long agenda, and I will try to answer your questions at this point.
Thank you, Lynn. Do we have a planting plan in our file?
Yes.
Okay. Question from the commissioner. Pete?
Yes, Lynn, I want to commend you for protecting our resources that we at the Conservation Commission are expected to protect. Thank you so much for the work you do and the advice that you give to your clients. Thank you.
Any other comment from the commissioner? I have two simple questions. One, I know in the wetland delineation, you did that, but in the drawing, you did not mention any about when did you do the delineation for that?
I submitted, they should be in Darcy's file. I submitted the vegetation sheets, which will have a date on it.
Yes, she does. I did find the whole file. I'm just trying to find, she did submit the vegetation sheets that I found. I'm looking for the landscape plan. So
Okay.
I can try, maybe my screen share will work. I have it up on my screen.
We have it in the file, Tom.
Yeah.
We got it with we have the paperwork.
I mean,
Yeah.
I've delineated it recently for the John O'Reilly's field crew. So it's not an old delineation, it's a recent delineation. Just that the pool people and the survey people, I'm sure as everybody knows, are backlogged. Oh, here we go. I have the date. So April 22nd, 2021 is when I flagged the wetland.
Because typically we will have a date with a delineation, wetland resource delineation information. The second one is, I am not sure as far as the, it's nice for you to put this, the pool way back out, in the second half of the riparian zone. But in the, one of the areas is kind of mentioning about the limit of work. Because since you are a 8-foot retaining wall, you may have to dig a little bit more in terms of your limit of work. So I'm curious, what is that limit of work? When you label that limit of work, doesn't seems to be adequate. That's my thought. That's a my comment.
I'm about 5 feet off the retaining wall. And it's at its narrowest. And that's what the engineer and was comfortable putting in. I mean, if you want to grant them a wider work area, I'm sure that won't be a problem.
No, because the thing though is for this 8-foot retaining wall, I'm sure the footing is quite wide.
Mhm.
Okay. By
Well-
going 5 feet of limit of work, in the drawing, you just have an arrow pointing to that open area. So is that the whole thing, or what is that, the limit of work? I'm not sure, that's all.
Well, on the landscape plan, it shows the area between the work limit and the wall to be vegetated with native plants. And the work limit line is the hatch line. There's also a note on the plan that the wall's to be designed by a structural engineer. They didn't want to take that expense right now. If the structural engineer dictates that work limit line needs to be moved, I'll be back to you with the revised plan approval request.
If that's the case, I'm fine with it, because for 8-footer, you need a structural engineer design, period. So I'm
Right.
fine
I
with
finally got the
what you
plan up.
mentioned.
There it is.
I had to search through all of the list of things.
Thank you. But yeah, there's a note right on the plan that the wall's to be designed by a structural engineer.
Okay. Any
Yeah,
other
I
questions?
didn't. Oh, I'm sorry.
Go ahead.
I was looking for something that said landscaping plan, and you have this as mitigation corrected. So that's why I didn't know that was your mitigation plan.
all right.
So,
Because
Darcy, questions?
no, I am good.
You good?
Mhm.
Any other comment from the commission? None. 10:18, a public comment on this.
Seeing none.
None. Could I have a motion to approve this project as submitted?
So moved.
Moved.
Second.
Roll call. Roll call.
Sampu,
Aye.
Moran,
Aye.
Lee,
Aye.
Hearn,
Aye.
Foster,
Aye.
Abadili.
Aye.
Gilmore, aye. That's unanimous.
Thank you. Good luck.
you.
The next NOI is Christian Camp Meeting Association. Proposed relocations of existing and under and around structures within the coastal beach at 915 Craigville Beach Road, Sandyville, as shown in Assessors Map 225, Parcel 001. Cameron?
Yes, good evening, Commission. This is Cameron Larkin representing the applicant. If it's okay, I'd like to share my screen to proceed with the presentation.
Yes.
So again, for the record, Cameron Larson with Environmental Consulting and Restoration, and the applicant Christian Camp Meeting Association, to present the commission with the notice of intent for 915 Craigville Beach Road. Before I begin, I also want to point out, I do believe that Fran LaHaye and John Gombar are in the audience, both of which are members of the Christian Camp Meeting Association, and will be available for any questions if necessary. So I'd like to begin by just giving the commission an overview of the site. 915 Craigville Beach Road is home to the Craigville Beach Association. I'm sure many of the commission members are familiar with this property. It's owned and operated by the Christian Camp Meeting Association. They operate it as a private beach club during the summer months. I'm going to bring you now up and above here, an overview, indicated by this orange arrow that shows the parcel that we are looking at for this notice of intent. It sits on the south side of the Cape, obviously, abutting Nantucket Sound to the south. There's Craigville Beach, or the public access to Craigville Beach off to the west, and Covell's Beach with some residential properties off to the east of the site. I'm going to bring us in a little bit closer now. This is the CBA property. If you can follow around the mouse here, there's the main beach house centrally located on the northern limit of the property. There's gravel parking along Craigville Beach Road. These small structures to either side of the main beach house are all storage lockers that are utilized by the association members. And then on this far east end is what they call the snack shack. The entire site itself is located within a barrier beach system. There's a large, expansive coastal beach, obviously, that you can see here in the photo. And then the entire site is also located within land subject to flooding. So this application is in front of you tonight for what we're referring to as a sand relocation project. It's essentially a maintenance activity that the association has historically undertaken on a regular basis. Up until now, the association has undertaken this work under a determination that was issued by the Conservation Commission back in 2005. Conservation staff recently notified the applicant that it would be more appropriate to complete this work under an order of conditions. So that brings us here tonight with the notice of intent. Now, the overall intent of the project is to relocate the windblown sand that's accumulated around the structures, the beach house, the snack shack, and the storage lockers, and relocate that out to the actual primary beach system. As I mentioned, it's historically been undertaken by the association. They utilize typically a small, what they refer to as a dingo machine. It's a small front loader, a stand behind front loader that can get in between the storage lockers, scoop that sand, and then relocate it out to the primary beach system. It typically includes laborers also with hand shovels underneath the structures to kind of shovel out to a point where that dingo machine can scoop and move. The association plans to complete this on an annual or biannual basis every 2 years, depending on how necessary it is. That's kind of been their typical schedule in the past. I'm going to bring you to the next slide here just to show you a few photographs. This one in the top left is a view across that coastal beach and the primary beach system where the sand from the structures will be located. In the top right, you can see the access that's utilized. This access is on the eastern end of the property between just off the edge of the snack shack. It's gated, but there is enough room for that small dingo machine to get through. There'd be no disturbance to this dune system over here to the east. The machine's small enough to get by that. So we're not proposing any work in that dune. And then these photos below kind of give you an idea of the accumulated sand in and around these structures. You can kind of see by the stairs filling up, the sand coming up above some of the stringers. So the idea is to move this sand and relocate it, again, just so it doesn't, accumulate too much in and around these structures, but also in a way acting as a nourishment to that primary beach system without having to bring any sand from offsite. We did provide the commission with a GIS plan that shows the proposed sand removal area in and around those structures, seen here in yellow, and then an approximate sand relocation area shown here in orange. The access, you can see my mouse here, is over on this eastern side, so that'll be the access for that small machine. This project is under review by Natural Heritage. It is in mapped habitat. We expect it to be in some type of shorebird habitat. We haven't heard back from Natural Heritage at this point. We're awaiting their comments. We expect that they'll probably Want to condition the project with time of year restrictions, which the applicant's well aware of and perfectly acceptable to that restriction. Anyways, at this point, if the commission has any questions, I'd be happy to address those.
Larry?
Thank you. Cameron, I've got three questions. I started off in my mind with one, but now I have three. The first question, and this was brought to my attention in other projects, but the removal and relocation of the sand, is there any requirement or need that the sand be tested or checked in terms of the fact that it's been under the beach house, the beach lockers for quite a while? But is there anything that might have affected the content or quality of the sand that would necessitate any checking of it? The second thing is and I'll let you answer them all at once. The second deals with the pictures you showed. When was the last time that this project was performed by CBA? So is there a way of measuring it? And the third requirement is something I've already forgotten. That's what happens when you get older. So if I think of it later, I'll come back, but I'm sure other commissioners may chime in with some questions. Those are just primarily it's a great project. It's a needed project. That's not the issue. The issue, are there any things that we should be concerned about? And I'll let you address that as you see fit. Thank you.
Yep, sure. Thank you for the questions. And no, we don't expect the sand underneath and around the structures that's proposed to be relocated to have been impacted in any way. There's no vehicle traffic or anything. It's in and around the decks that are traveled by pedestrians. And again, this has been completed on a regular basis to the point where a lot of this windblown sand is simply, from last year. It's very evident that this is windblown sand from the primary beach system. So there's no, it's all compatible material, and we don't expect there to be any, issues with that. It's simply moving the sand back to really where it had come from originally. In regards to when the last time the work was completed, I'd have to defer to either Fran or John. Maybe they can give you an answer on that. But I suspect within the last year or two. If Fran or John is still here, if they,
I'm here. This is John.
excellent. Thanks, John.
Yeah, hi, John.
Yeah, I hope everybody can hear me. Typically what we were doing is when we open the beach in, depends, usually late May, early June, they'll get it in there to do it at that time. And that's been done annually. And then in the fall, we typically do it when we draw the sand out of those bays where it's accumulated over the summer. We draw it out of the bays. And then when we open the beach again in June, we'll do it at that time.
And I can add to that also. The last time we did it, as John said, was in the spring of 2021.
Thank you. Bill?
I just want to say it looks like a really innocuous project.
Yeah, you need to get done.
It's a no-brainer.
Yeah. John?
Just one comment on timing, and then this is going to want to be ongoing. Starts with a 3-year cycle. They can ask for an extension, obviously, and a second and first extension. Is there a way to address this on a longer-term basis, or do they have to come back every 3 years?
I think we could do it. We could probably add the special condition. The problem was we were doing it under an RDA, and it was a condition that was saying they need to check with NHESP first, I think. And what happened is it didn't get done. So we were like, we got to start all over again and make sure that we have what their guidelines are going to be to put in the order of conditions. So I would have to think about whether we want to have an ongoing condition that they can continue, because I don't know whether NHESP, I guess we could say as long as they check in with NHESP each time, but that was the problem, that it didn't happen before.
Okay.
I don't know.
So we could probably write the order to allow them to continue this, subject to that condition of the NHESP, you think?
That we have to have it in writing before
Okay.
they have reviewed it
Yeah.
to make sure there are not any
Okay.
changes.
So that review can be either an email or letter.
Right.
Luis?
Can't we have more than one extension? I think we've had
Yeah, I
at
mean,
least three-year extensions, which get out to 10 years, 9 years.
But you know, like with Mr. Pruny, we allow that to go on and on. They don't have to come back every 3 years and ask for that. I mean, it just, as Bill said, it's a pretty innocuous project. So why make them come back every 3 years, even if it's just for an extension request? And after the second year, the third year, we got to make an exception. You know, I just a thought. I'm not arguing either way.
I would say I wouldn't be comfortable with just an email. I think we need to have an official letter from NHESP after every 3 years, or when the permit is going to be up. We're going to have ongoing conditions. It should be a letter from NHESP.
Right.
Okay.
Just to chime in briefly, I believe NHESP, I believe their decisions are good for either 3 or 5 years anyway, so we have to, reply to them, but we could certainly, coordinate with the commission at that point.
Okay.
Luis, I called you, right? Already?
Oh, you did. Thank you.
Any other comment from the commissioner? None. Channel 18, any public comment?
Seeing none.
Could I have a motion to approve this project as submitted, but we need the continuance waiting for the issuance of the NHESP letter? At that time, we can address the time of the year or the length of the special conditions.
So moved.
In a second. Roll call.
Abadili,
Yep, go ahead.
Don't you need a continuance date, Tom?
Yeah. When do you think that you will get the NHESP letter? Next hearing date is October the 25th.
We'll have by then. Their 30 days is up on the 22nd.
So we have a continuance to October the 25th.
So moved.
second.
Roll call.
Abadili,
Aye.
Foster,
Bye.
Gilmore, aye. Kern,
Aye.
Lee.
Aye.
Warren,
Aye.
Sambo.
Aye.
That's unanimous.
Thank you.
Excellent.
Good luck.
Thank you very much, Commissioner. Have a good night.
The next NOI is Kurt Steinpress, trustee 115 Shore Drive West Realty Trust, to construct a pool, patio, and cabana, and with all associated appurtenances at 81 Oyster Way, Oysterville, as shown on the Assessors Map 072, Parcel 042. John.
Good evening, John Day from Sullivan Engineering Consulting, representing the applicants. This property is just under 2 acres of land on Oyster Harbors on Oyster Way. Bring up the plan. It's developed with a single family dwelling that was built under an order of conditions around 1999. There is an existing pool on the seaward side of the dwelling. There is a pier off to the side that was permitted around the same time, also under an order of conditions. Our wetlands at this site are land under ocean, which would be Windmill Cove off of West Bay, and then an area of salt marsh and land subject to coastal storm flowage. So the project as proposed is to construct a new pool. That pool is located with a patio around it. Its closest point 72 feet from the salt marsh. And then extending landward, about half that pool's outside of the 100-foot buffer, a cabana up near the garage of the house that's just clipping the flood zone area. So we have an undisturbed 50-foot buffer on this property. We have a limit of work set up along it. We have called for full drawdown on the plan, and I think with that, I would be happy to answer any questions the commission might have.
Question from the commissioner, John?
Yeah, there's a notation on here, remove 5 trees. What's that all about, John?
So landward of the work limit, like there's a tree in the pool that has an X on it. And there's a tree, a couple
Right.
trees right by the wall that have X's. So I put X's on the 5. They're all landward of the work limit, landward of the 50. I just put the note by one of them.
Okay, oh, all right. It's not then by the stairs going down there or
There's
whatever.
two of them right there by the stairs. There's 2 above it, and then one in the pad, one in the pool, and 2 right along this wall.
Well, the one in the pool is understandable. Why do you have to take those other ones down?
Well, these 2 are right along a patio wall. The ones by the bottom of the stairs. Let me try to zoom in here.
Yeah, right there. Those trees, 2 there. Hello?
I'm looking at it. I'm trying to look at the grading
Right.
as well as to whether or not there's some grading in that area.
Yeah.
You know, again, they're like 75 feet from the work limit, and we're leaving 50 feet of trees to the water.
Yeah, I'm just thinking, my sense is that we don't want to, I don't like to see where those trees are gonna be removed. Now, it's within the pool footprint, that's pretty obvious. But unless there's a solid reason, I don't understand why you're removing those other trees except to take trees down.
Which outside of the 50-foot buffer on a site that has an undisturbed 50-foot buffer, I don't think that there would be anything in the regulations. I think the presumption would be that we meet all the performance standards.
Well, I'm not quite sure I would agree with that there's a presumption that just because you have an undisturbed buffer, you can add hardscape without mitigation. I understand that, but taking down trees that already exist within the conservation jurisdiction, I'm not sure where your presumption would come from, John. I'd have trouble with that. Now, again, within the pool, and the pool is approved, obviously understandable. But other than that, why taking down good trees within this conservation area? And certainly there's nothing in the regulation that would allow that, I understand.
Can I just add something? I'm sorry.
Go ahead.
I understand what John's trying to say, because we've had people come in and they asked to build a house and they clear for the house and the lawn, and they put a split rail fence up at the 50-foot and they take the trees down. This is the first I'm hearing that they have to keep the trees, but this is kind of new to what.
Yeah, I'm not quite sure I remember this kind of a situation either, Darcy, I have to admit. And again, I'm just kind of surprised as I sit here and say, why removing those trees? And why removing something that's add value to the land, to the property, to the conservation issues we're concerned with? Unless obviously there was a reason,
Yeah.
which I haven't heard.
I understand what John is trying to say, that John O'Day is trying to say. That
Okay.
I've never heard of anything of us telling them they have to keep the trees between the 50 and the 100. We've allowed people to clear everything right up to the 50. But
Okay, just my thought. Certainly there's nothing in the regulation that says they can do it without permission.
Right. Bill?
I have a lot of concerns with this project, and let me just start by saying, this seems like a major expansion of the backyard, and it starts before you even get to the 100-foot buffer. You've got a proposed terrace, a proposed cabana. Cabana terrace, the lower terrace, another pool, then the pool terrace. and they have this really huge pool. And then you take out all the trees. And I guess I have sort of a scientific and a philosophical problem, and I just want to bare my soul if I could. I'm having a problem with this project. I hear John and he says, well, you know, it's a pristine 0 to 50, so we can do anything. And I have a problem with that. And yet our regulations basically say that. And Darcy's going, well, you know, we allow them to just take stuff out in that 50 to 100. And I know that from a scientific standpoint, you know, the 0 to 50 you need to protect, and you get most of the pollutants, you know, taken out. You know, they settle out or are taken up by vegetation. But the literature, the scientific literature, and even our preface to our bylaw talks about how, you know, it could be more. And other places they find there should be more. And yet we have this bylaw that says, oh, you got a perfect 50, don't worry about it, you can take it out. And yet the slope and what is that vegetation is important. And what is the soil? And so really the 50 to 100 can be very important for trying to keep pollutants out of the salt marsh. And we know that. And yet we have a reg that says, you do it, you can clear cut the place. I personally have a real problem with that. And yet, you know, I know that, you know, someone that if we all voted, you know, and say, no, we can't do this, you know, we could be taken to court or what have you, or you know, have it appealed, and would probably lose. And yet I feel like we can do. And so my comment is I think basically I have a real problem with our bylaw. And I wonder if that shouldn't be changed. I don't know if that's the place for me to be saying that, but I have a real problem. I can't support that. I would feel guilty personally supporting this, and maybe I'll just abstain. One last point, a philosophical point. And I get on my soapbox too high, and I don't want to take too much time here. Aldo Leopold, back in 1948, wrote Sand County Almanac, and he's kind of like one of the pioneer environmentalists back in the 40s. And he made a really, really good point in that book. He said, gee, you know, we're starting in the 1940s, coming up with these government regulations to try to protect the environment. And he used to work for the Soil Conservation Service. And he said, you know, where does this end? When is it that, you know, there's always going to be another law to protect the environment? It's too complicated. And he called for a conservation ethic, that people need to realize that, you know, you have to live with the earth, and you can't just, you know, pave paradise and put in a parking lot and, oh, you got the 50, let's just clear it and put in everything. And so we have a law, we have a bylaw, and we have the Wetlands Protection Act, and it would essentially say, yeah, you have to do that. But I find something wrong with it. I know that the 50 to 100 is valuable, and we allow lawns in the 0 to 50, and that's not good enough. I do not like this project, but I'm stymied by our regulations. Thank you.
Thank you, Bill. Pete?
Yeah, actually, both Commissioner Abadili and Commissioner Hearn have raised important points. Certainly the science that Dr. Hearn talks about is valid and does apply. We do have jurisdiction up to the 100, but Darcy, we have provided a level of lax, being fairly lax with that 50 to 100 if, quote, we have an undisturbed 50. I think the point that Commissioner Abadili makes is a wonderfully valid point. And yeah, I have to agree with both these men. You know, we should have a concern. And again, you know, our regulations, our bylaws say one thing, but I get troubled as well. Just saying. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Pete. Any other comment from the commissioner?
I do. If I
Bill.
might. Yeah, I noticed that the hay bales are right on the 50. And that's something that we have in the past kicked the hay bales off the 50 and moved them, a little bit inland. And I wonder if we might do that and perhaps save a few of the trees. That's what I mean.
So
He's not
The
taking down any of those trees, is he?
there's a fence. There's a big sturdy fence, I believe, that demarcates the
Right.
space between the 50 and the 100. And beyond the fence, it is definitely untouched. Well, let's see, I can't say definitely, but it is very densely covered with growth.
And it's not taking down any trees, right, within that area?
No, the trees
I
that
see.
we're talking about are way on the other side of the
Yeah.
50 to 100.
Right.
I would say that there are very few trees between the 50 and 100 anyway. And it is a shame to see those trees gone. But because of our bylaw, we really, I don't think have a real good solid ground to stand on, but we could say to John O'Day, could you convey our concern to the homeowner? Because maybe they haven't really thought about it, and maybe they would change their mind about eliminating those trees.
John, go ahead.
Yeah, Louise, I don't think that there's anything in our bylaws that requires us to allow him to remove those trees. I don't agree with that reading of it. As the bylaw sits, as the regs sit today. So I think we have every legal right to say, we want you to leave those trees, other than those that have to be taken down for the purposes of the approval of, assuming we approve it. I'm okay with that.
I think in the past, we have not been paying a lot of attention between the 50 and 100 for the tree removal, as far as, like this locations wise. And, we can ask John to talk to the client, see whether they can preserve those 3 trees, that, on the plans. So, John O'Day, what do you think?
Yeah, just to respond to that, a couple things. I think that, and I think the staff is sort of confirming with me that, the regulations 7043B says where a 50-foot undisturbed buffer zone, as measured in accordance with, exists prior to the proposed work is proposed to remain intact. Proposed work within the 50 to 100-foot buffer shall not require further buffer zone enhancement.
Exactly right. It shall not require further buffer zone enhancement. It doesn't say you can have a right to eliminate existing buffer zone enhancements.
I can't recall.
That's the difference in the reading. And I understand where Darcy's coming from, but I'm not sure that we're bound by that as we look at this. That's all. There's nothing in the regulation saying we can't do this.
Right.
That's true. This, I guess, I just think that the precedent has been that the commission has allowed work up to the 50. I'd also say that the best practices listed in the commission's regulations ask for hardscape to be no closer than 10 feet from the 50-foot buffer. I think that the design was done, well within the commission's best practices. I think that these trees around the patio area are within the project area. I have been able to confer with the applicant as we're having this meeting, if there's concern about these 2 trees at the bottom of the stairs, that we would be willing to sort of revisit those and or replace them if they are, right at the bottom of the set of stairs, that we might be able to replace those 2 trees with something else within the buffer zone.
So you'd be willing to replace them if it was necessary to remove them for the project? Is that what you're saying?
That's what I was saying for these trees at the bottom of the stairs. I can't picture what they look like, whether they're worth preserving, not preserving, can be worked around, better replaced. but it is something that the applicant is willing to
Okay.
revisit as part of it.
But just speaking for myself, you know, if it's determined that those trees are necessary to be removed for purposes of this project or otherwise endangered somehow, then we would authorize Darcy to say, go ahead, you can remove them and replace them somewhere subject to her taking a look at it. I'd be okay with that, just speaking for myself.
Thank you, John. Any other comment from the commissioner? 10:18, any public comment?
Seeing none.
Could I have the motions to approve this project subject to the conditions that John was mentioning, that if the condition need to remove the trees, then it needs to match the conservation administrator no and replacing the trees.
Removed.
Second,
Roll call.
Abadili,
Aye.
Foster,
Aye.
Gilmore, aye, Hearn,
I'm going to abstain.
Lee,
Aye.
Moran,
Aye.
and Boo.
I'm going to abstain also.
Motion carries, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. The next NOI is 771 SVA LLC, proposed removal and reconstruction of a single-family dwelling garage, associated accessory buildings, and associated site improvement at 771 Seaview Avenue, Osterville, as shown on the Assessors Maps 113, Parcel 005-003. Sean.
John Riley, Coastal Engineering, representing the applicant here at 771 CU Avenue.
Yeah.
Let me just share my screen real quick. Everybody see my screen?
No.
Not yet.
Oh, sorry. Must have hit stop share. Let's try that again. There we go. How's that?
Yep.
The resource areas on this property are coastal beach. We have a coastal dune that has come off of the coastal beach and formed nicely on the coastal bank, which I've highlighted here in yellow. We have a flood zone that comes up onto the bank and terminates on that coastal bank. And we have a developed property with the existing house, patios, and wood deck that are currently encroaching into the 0 to 50 foot no disturb zone. The project before you is to raise and replace this building to shift it back outside of the 50-foot no disturb zone. Just looking at the existing conditions, I want to point out there's a privet hedge that runs along the eastern side of the property. North is to the left, and also a piece of hedge that is on property, and it's privet on the the west side of the property. So the project before you is essentially to just raise and replace the existing house, pull it back, as I said, to replace that existing privet hedge with an arborvitae. So take out the invasive privet, replace it with the arborvitae, to perform some minor grading within the lawn area, within the back of the house, to install new dry wells. There currently aren't any dry wells on the existing dwelling to capture any of the roof runoff. Having some back and forth with Darcy, she's requested that we add those dry wells. We have a note on the plan that states that all the gutters and downspouts will be routed to dry wells to add those to the plan. We've updated our plan, but barring any other changes, we'll reissue that. The other comment that Darcy had made was just to clarify and to show that this coastal bank is in fact both a DEP defined coastal bank and a Barnstable defined coastal bank, as it does reside immediately adjacent to the tidal action, and it also has the flood zone on it. We're proposing to, there's a small dead pine at the top of the ramp that we're proposing to remove. There's a flagpole proposed. And other than that, there's no removal of any trees. Everything that we're doing is within the developed area. The only thing that we are removing would be lawn and the privet hedge, and putting this back in a location that is further from the resource areas. With that, I'll open it up to any questions you may have. Oh, and we have a reduction, sorry, we have a reduction of coverage overall. We're taking out 115 square feet in the 0 to 50 and only putting back 105. So we've got 10-foot net reduction overall without taking the proposed multiplier of the 4 to 1 in the 0 to 50 for credit. So we're not even taking that. With that, I'll open it up to any questions you may have.
Thank you, Sean. Bill?
Yeah, I think this is a great project. I have like no objection. At the Conservation Commission, we don't have any authority to require you to put in a more advanced nitrogen removing septic system. However, I've been plugging them on projects like this. This is a big build. You're on Seaview Ave and you're moving, you're taking out a house. This is a very expensive project, obviously. And putting in a new septic system that would remove nitrogen would be a very minor increase in the cost. Our shore, in Nantucket Sound, we have incredible amounts of seaweed, as you know. It's because of the nitrogen. Go to Covels, go to Oregon Beach, not just in the coves like Three Bays. We have a nitrogen problem. And I think that, homeowners, they might want to be able to help this problem. Currently, that area is not going to be sewered. And I think this is something that the homeowner might want to take pride in doing. So I encourage you to at least, advise them that they have the capacity to do that. I know our town is approving these kinds of innovative alternative like the nitro system, which removes the nitrogen. And I hope that you will talk to them, try to persuade them. This is a good conservation thing they can do for an insignificant increase in the cost of this project. Thank you.
Through the chair, yeah, we have that conversation with our clients. One of the really good systems is the actually Perkrite drip dispersal system that we explain all the benefits of the uptake in the root system. So we will have those conversations.
Thank you.
Thank you. John?
Yeah, I'd endorse Bill's comments on this particular project. It really lends itself to that. Sean, one of the little problems that I saw, if you look at where it says the timber ramp
Yes.
on the west side, right next to it, there's real runoff going down there. There's a lack of vegetation. Somebody put in some grasses along the bottom of the ramp there, along the side, but just kind of wondering if you get a chance to stick in a couple of bushes right up at the top there to prevent that. It's clearly groundwater runoff running down.
Absolutely. Yes, that's not a problem. We hopefully will take care of a lot of that runoff issue with the addition of the dry wells, but it's only a benefit to the homeowner to stabilize that area and to have a healthy environment along that coastal bank.
Thank you, Sean.
Especially whether you want to some of that area to minimize or redirect some of your stormwater to your dry well.
Yeah.
Put in. Louise?
We should have elevations, should we not? And we don't yet. True. We have elevations. I don't see them in my package.
Are you talking about elevation views of the structure? It's a single level on the ocean side, so it really has a minimizing impact. We can provide them if it's necessary.
I think it would be
We
good
didn't see
to
where
have it
it's.
in the file.
Sure, we can
The
provide.
other thing is that dead tree that you plan on removing. I like the way it looks, but that's just me, and it's probably a danger issue in terms of it's being so close to the steps. You might want to consider putting in another tree, not necessarily right there, but we don't have any trees, we have very few trees at all, as I recall.
We can have that discussion as well with the homeowner when we talk about the revegetation of that, that scarped out area.
Yeah, you should get a replacement tree if you want to take that down and plant it someplace else. Any other question from the commissioner? The only one that I have just a minor comment. Sean, can you show the limit of work for your excavation and so forth for your house?
Yeah, we've actually just run it along the edge of the lawn area and along the property line. So you should have that on your plan here. Limit of work.
Okay.
Yep. And then we'll make the modifications that Darcy requested for the
dry well.
Yep.
The dry well and labeling
Labeling the top of
the state
Barnstable Bank.
Yeah. And I have a follow-up question. So we do,
Yeah, Darcy, go ahead.
being with a town bank, we want to make sure we have the special condition, the commission votes the special condition in about no
Hardened
coastal
structures.
structure. Yeah.
Yep.
So we have to have the on the boilerplate 29, 310 CMR 1030 Wetland Protection Act requires no coastal engineering structure such as bulkhead, revetment, or seawall shall be permitted on a eroding coastal bank at any time in the future.
Understood.
So what is your condition number?
Well, it's number 29 on the boilerplate, but just say that you're approving the special condition that no coastal structure will be permitted on an eroding bank.
Okay.
Thank you.
Any other comment from the commissioner? None. Channel 18, any public comments?
Seeing none.
Could I have a motions to approve this project subject to receipt of a revised plan showing the dry well for the road roof runoff, the town bank labeling and no coastal structures to be built at the town coastal bank near or the town coastal bank, right, Darcy?
Yes.
And the replace the tree if you want to replace the tree that you are removing at some other location that you desire, and check the drainage in terms of the runoff on the western side near the what is that, timber ramp?
Timber ramp, correct.
I think that's about it.
Can I just clarify? So the tree replacement, that's if they want to do it, or we're ordering a replacement tree for the. I was sorry, I was looking up the coastal bank thing. So.
No, I think we should do it as a replacement tree because you're so on coastal bank.
Okay, thank you.
So moved.
Second.
Roll call.
Sam Fu,
Excuse me, just to be clear, that tree
Aye.
replacement,
just a minute.
sorry, through the chair, that just came
Yeah,
quickly.
but-
The tree, the tree replacement, could that be anywhere within your jurisdiction?
Yeah.
It's just a very, sorry.
It should be
Yeah,
on the bank, should it not?
In
Or
the
is it-
areas, in the area, that's all.
Okay.
Sam Fu,
Aye.
Lauren,
Aye.
Lee.
Aye.
Hearn,
Aye.
Foster,
Aye,
Abadili,
Aye.
Gilmore, aye, that's unanimous.
Thank you.
Thank you. Good luck. We have 3 continuances. The first one is Helen Hughes to construct and maintain a fixed pier ramp and float at 94 Long Beach Road, Sandyville, as shown in Assessors Map 206, Parcel 007. And this is a continuance from September the 13th. And the applicant went in front of the waterway and the harbor master, and they are proposing to have a revised layout going in front of them in October 25th. So the applicant has requested a continuance November the 8th. Could I have a motion to continue this applications to November the 8th?
Excuse Excuse me, so my record show this was all 7, correct, George?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. So moved.
Second,
Roll call.
Abadili,
Aye.
Foster,
Aye.
Gilmore, aye. Hearn,
Aye.
Lee,
Aye.
Moran,
Aye.
Sampo.
aye.
That's unanimous.
Thank you. The second continuance is Eversource Energy constructions of new electric transmission lines and relocated distribution line on existing right-of-way and electric substations expansion work, a portions of which will occur in the 100-foot buffer zones to local and state jurisdictional wetland resource area at 625 and 661 Oak Street, West Barnstable, as shown on the Assessors Map 194 Parcel 021 and Assessors Map 195 Parcel 029. Let's see. Mike.
Good evening, Mr. Chair. How are you? Can you hear me?
Yes.
Nice to meet you. Nice to meet your fellow commissioners. And Darcy and Kim, it's nice to meet you, especially Kim in person after all our emails. So good evening. For the record, Mr. Chair, my name is Mike Howard from Epsilon Associates, an environmental consulting and engineering firm based out of Maynard, Mass. We have filed a notice of intent with the commission this evening on behalf of Eversource Energy. The NOI was filed in accordance with the State Wetlands Protection Act, as well as Barnstable's Wetlands Protection Bylaw. We are seeking an order of conditions from the commission authorizes certain aspects of a new electric transmission line on existing Eversource right-of-way, including related ancillary work that I'll describe in further detail this evening, as well as an expansion of the fence line at Eversource's existing West Barnstable substation on Oak Street. As I'll also explain further detail in a moment, another work proposed and described in the notice of intent involves work in wetland resource areas. There are, however, discrete components that are located within a 100-foot buffer zone to resource areas. Before we continue, Chair, with your permission, I would just like to introduce other members of the project team who are with me tonight and would be available to answer any questions the commission might have. And I'll ask my colleagues to turn the cameras on when I announce them. Devlin. We lose Matt. There he is. Hey, Matt. Matt Devlin from Eversource Environmental. John Garrity. All the screens are moving. I assume John's there somewhere. There's John. John is Eversource's project manager. Ronit Goldstein is from Eversource's Community Relations Group. Megan Akinfor, where's Meg? There you are. She's from Eversource's Project Services Group. Jim Curtis is with us tonight. He's from Eversource's Substation Group. And last but certainly not least is our colleague Rich Lewis, civil engineer from BHB Associates. Rich assisted with the civil design plans and stormwater work at the West Barnstable substation. So thank you, Mr. Chair, for letting me introduce the team.
Sure.
Just a couple of housekeeping items. Mass DEP has issued its file number. It's SE 36032, and they did not have any comments on the filing. Subsequent to the filing of the notice of intent with commission, the Natural Heritage Program submitted its comments on the notice of intent because a portion of the project is mapped priority and estimated habitat. They have provided a letter for the commission's files dated September 27th, determining that proposed work will not adversely affect rare species habitats. And then related to that, on September 23rd, the Natural Heritage Program issued a separate authorization letter to Eversource approving the project that's being described in front of the commission tonight, but under the guise of MISA.
One thing I just wanted to mention, the first letter that you mentioned is a reference to the right-of-way and substation at 625 and 661 Oak Street. That is the projects that will not adversely affect the actual resource area habitat. The second letter that they made is make a reference to the right-of-way 342 bonds switching stations to West Barnstable substation. So there was two separate area.
Right. One was for the entire project, Mr. Chair, on MISA, and the second was just for the Barnstable Conservation Commission for work in that community.
Right.
Thank you for that clarification. With your permission, Mr. Chair, I'll share my screen and walk the commission through some of the graphics and plans that are included in the notice of intent.
Yeah, please do.
course, I'll have to ask, can you see my screen?
Yes.
Yes, thank you. All right, so let me just get the commission's bearings. Again, this project is referred to as the Mid-Cape Reliability Project. It involves 12.5 miles of new overhead electric transmission line construction on existing Eversource right-of-way 342, which is shown in yellow on this aerial locus map. Just to get your bearings, this is Joint Base Cape Cod and Eversource's existing Bourne switching station. Our project starts there, stays on the existing right-of-way through Bourne, through Joint Base Cape Cod into Sandwich, and into the town of Barnstable, where the line terminates at the existing West Barnstable substation on Oak Street. Work is proposed in all three communities. However, for those of you who are familiar with the right-of-way, the vast majority of it is high and dry with few wetlands present throughout. Within Barnstable, wetlands are generally concentrated in the Pine Street area where there are some active commercial cranberry bogs and wetlands associated with Sandy Hill Pond, and Spruce Pond. There's also a small pocket wetland adjacent to the West Barnstable substation that I'll talk about more in a minute, and one other small off right-of-way wetland that I'll also talk about more in a minute. Okay. I'm going to switch to the permit drawing map set. This is attachment D in the notice that the commission has a lot of lines and blocks and colors on here. I think, Mr. Chair, this is probably a good opportunity for me to use this as a tool to walk the commission through some of the details of the proposed project. It's a 12-sheet set. I'm going to start on sheet 4 because that's where we have our first wetland, which is this isolated wetland here, if you can see my mouse moving, and the buffer zone from it. This is also within the West Barnstable Conservation Area. And if I need to zoom in more, just let me know. It's pretty big on my screen, but I can always zoom in more if I need to. So as you will see when you flip through the map set, from the very beginning, we work very closely with Eversource's design engineers, whenever possible and wherever possible. We want to try and locate the new transmission lines and the distribution poles outside of the 100-foot buffer zone and certainly outside of wetland resource areas. We were able to accomplish that for this project, being mindful of their engineering design considerations to avoid any work in wetlands. Just for some perspective, only 6 of the new transmission line structures in Barnstable are located in the 100-foot buffer zone, and I'll talk about those tonight. And 11 of the relocated distribution poles are located in the buffer zone, with several existing distribution poles being removed to facilitate this project. So again, this is a good sheet just to get your bearings. A lot of stuff in the legend, but just let me walk you through it. These gray dots here at the bottom edge of the right-of-way, those are existing wooden distribution poles. Those poles in their present configuration take up space that is needed for the new transmission line to be constructed. The new transmission line structures are these red dots. So these existing distribution poles will be removed from this portion of the right-of-way and relocated towards the center of the right-of-way where you see these blue dots. These are the new distribution poles. So these come out, they get relocated here. This then creates space for our new transmission line structures. Let's see, once these existing distribution poles are removed, and these are just those wooden poles that the commission's familiar with, throughout the Cape. The excavated area where the poles previously existed will be stabilized with a native seed mix. Natural Heritage has encouraged us to use little blue stem just as a native seed wherever possible. We're happy to apply whatever is acceptable to the commission and Natural Heritage. It's our expectation these poles will be removed, but it's also possible that they could be cut flush with the ground, but that would be determined by Eversource. You will note on this sheet that there are more new distribution poles than existing distribution poles. That is due for reliability purposes. The lines are, I'm going to say this in layperson terms, Mr. Chair. My colleagues can speak in further detail, but the lines that exist there now are characterized as what's called open wire construction on cross arms to to create a more robust distribution line system, the new design is called a double spacer construction. So it requires more poles and a different design of poles to provide that reliability that Eversource seeks on its distribution line system. A couple other dots on this plan. If you look carefully, you'll see little white circles. Those are existing transmission line structures that you'll see in the right-of-way now, the steel monopole structures that exist along this right-of-way. The project does not propose any work to the existing structures. I'm going to turn back to the new transmission line structures, which are these red dots, and they've been numbered sequentially. So these are obviously more robust than the distribution poles. These require a concrete foundation, also known as a drilled pier or a caisson. Again, if you've looked at these in the field, they're about 5 feet in diameter, plus or minus. They're excavated to about 15 to 30 feet in depth, depending on the height and the load conditions of the transmission structure. The foundation work for a project like this, Mr. Chair, goes pretty quick. On average, it takes about 3 to 4 days to complete each foundation. We're probably at each work site for 2 to 3 weeks at most. Any excess soil from the structure foundations is stabilized and placed and spread around the edges of the work pads and other upland locations along the right-of-way outside of jurisdictional areas. Once the foundations are built, the new steel monopoles come in. They typically come in segments, 2, sometimes 3, depending on the length. They're brought in on flatbed trucks. They're then assembled using cranes and bucket trucks. After the structures are installed and the support arms are installed and the conductors are installed, the system is grounded by installing what we call a loop system around each structure. These are essentially grounding leads, also known as counterpoise, to ground the facility. I'm just going to walk you through some of these boxes that you see. These brown boxes are what we call work pads. These work pads are about 100 feet by 100 feet. These are the level graded areas that the transmission line contractor, the construction team, in order to do this safely, they need a level and a graded work pad to set up their equipment and install the facilities. The purple boxes are what we call pull pads. Pull pads are where the conductors are pulled from structure to structure after they're installed. They're a little bit smaller than the work pads for distribution, but they're a little bit larger for transmission, and I'll show you that in a second. Let's see. When the project is done, these work pads will be removed. And again, they're just going to be comprised of gravel, and these areas will be substantially restored to their pre-existing condition with the native seed mixes that I made reference to. The pull pads are going to be comprised of timber construction mats, also known as swamp mats, not because we're in a wetland condition, but Natural Heritage asked that for the pull pads. We consider using those to minimize impacts to some of the rare species habitat that they seek to protect. And we agreed to that request. Let's see, I'm just looking at my notes, Mr. Chair. While not specifically called out on this map set, we obviously have to get to these existing wooden distribution poles to remove them. That will require bucket trucks and other similar vehicles traveling from the gravel access roads to get to those locations and remove them. They will typically create workspace areas there if it's needed. And again, it depends on every site. But they could be roughly 30 feet by 30 feet as well. If there is any land disturbance in those locations, Eversource is also committed to restoring those when the work is complete. I'm just going to switch to sheet 5 for a second, not because there's any conservation jurisdiction areas here, but just because you'll see some features here that show up in some of the graphics. This blue dashed line is what we call a access road bump out. In some locations, it was not practicable, feasible for the design engineers to locate one of the new transmission line structures off an existing access road. So obviously, if it's going to be located on the access road, Eversource has to create or reconfigure the existing access road around it. So that's what these bump outs are. They're about 16 feet wide, consistent with the existing access roads. You'll also see in this map set these yellow exclusion zones. That's where we know there are some state listed plants that we are required to avoid during construction. in consultation with the Natural Heritage Program, and you'll see some of those polygons in some of these sheets as well. One other comment, and I'll flip to the next sheet. These yellow dashed lines are what we call spur roads. Sometimes we need to create a short, roughly 10-foot wide spur road to get to some of these new distribution poles with our construction equipment so we can safely access the work zone. Again, those are about 10 feet wide and they'd be restored when the work is complete as well. Just gonna cruise ahead, don't get motion sick. Okay. So this is where most of the work within Conservation Commission jurisdiction areas occur. This is sheet 9 of 12. This sheet and the next sheet depict work near the active commercial cranberry bogs, as well as Sandy Hill Pond and to a lesser degree Spruce Pond. This sheet depicts the activities I previously described, as well as the location of sediment controls along the limits of work. You will also note on this sheet, you see this purple line here, if you can see my mouse moving between pole 267 and 267A. Eversource is proposing a short underground distribution line connection to continue to provide power to this customer as a result of the project. That's about a 3-foot wide by 120-foot long trench. It will be backfilled and stabilized with a native seed mix, or as I mentioned, a little blue stem following construction. There's a lot of good photos in attachment E of the notice of intent, attachment F, and out of interest for the commission's time, I won't go through those now, but I do encourage you to look at that. It gives you a good snapshot of some of these areas. Most of these areas are composed of grass and just actively maintained areas used by the cranberry bog property owner. Okay, let me jump ahead to the last sheet in the set. And we can, of course, circle back with any questions the commission might have. So this is sheet 12 in this. This is the West Barnstable Substation. I'm going to show you another figure in a minute that shows the expansion that we described. The Conservation Commission jurisdictional area is associated with this small isolated wetland here. And you can see the buffer zones that extend from it. This yellow line are the proposed sediment controls. For some of you longer term Conservation Commission members, I think the last time I was back in front of you was about 2012, 2015 timeframe. This substation here was constructed at that time as part of NSTAR's Lower SEMA Reliability Project. A portion of the work, specifically in this location here, occurred within the buffer zone of the same wetland. Commission issued an order of conditions authorizing that work in April of 2011. And then following its construction in November of 2016, Commission issued a certificate of compliance, closing out that order and documenting that the work to build this new station was done in accordance with the permit. So this is figure 6 from the notice of intent application. In order to connect the new transmission line and in the existing West Barnstable substation, it's necessary to expand its western fence line by about 62 feet. And that's what this purple box essentially shows. This is the expansion of the existing fence line. And that will accommodate space for the new equipment that will be installed within that fence line. As you'll see on some of the photos in the notice of intent, most of that expansion work will take place on previously developed and disturbed gravel areas, including the existing access road and substation yard. If you look carefully at the photo, you can see the access road that goes right through the middle of it now. I'm tracing with my mouse. An additional roughly 0.8 acres of wooded uplands will be cleared and graded to accommodate the substation expansion work. Most of that is located outside the 100-foot buffer zone. Eversource did incorporate a retaining wall, which is this white line here, into the design to minimize additional alterations to the adjacent woodland upland areas and prefer as much natural buffer as is possible between the substation site and the adjoining residences over here to the west. We're trying to maximize the screening for those property owners, and the retaining wall tighten that up a little bit. So work in these areas does include grading. It includes reconfiguring an existing stormwater swale that was incorporated in the original design. We have to reconfigure the access road around the new fence line expansion. So this is the existing road that goes right through it. The new road will be installed around the perimeter of the new fence line. And some other odds and ends. I think those are the critical parts. Let me just go to one more detailed sheet here. This is sheet C301, attachment E of the notice of intent. These are the design drawings that Rich's office prepared. Obviously, they provide a little bit more detail. It's a little tough to see in this plan, but you can see the isolated wetland here. And if you look carefully, you can see the 50-foot and the 100-foot buffer zone. Let me just summarize for you the high points here. No tree removal is proposed within 50 feet. However, there will be some tree removal, about 3,000 square feet in total within the buffer zone beyond that, associated with the access road improvements. Remember, again, here's the existing access road. With the new station bump out, we have to reconfigure the new access road around the fence line, and that takes us up into this wooded area a little bit to allow for that construction. The good news is relocating the access road further away from the IVW than its current condition does result in a net reduction of impervious surface, almost 1,100 square feet within that zone. It also created an opportunity for us to restore these areas and other areas on this parcel with some native plantings. Just briefly with regards to stormwater management, the upgrades include expanding the existing infiltration basin to the south, which is over here to the left of the plan. This was constructed with the original substation approval. We are going to reconfigure the infiltration trench here and here that runs parallel with the gravel access road, as well as installing some new check dams, again, like the original approval. And as is demonstrated in the stormwater report, these modifications do comply with Mass DEP standards. Okay, mitigation. So I'm going to go to sheet L1, which is the planting plan in the set. And bear with me, Mr. Chair. I promise I'm almost done. Just want to make sure I walk you through all the key things. Okay. So this is sheet L101 in the drawing set. So Eversource proposes to install a total of 91 native plantings to mitigate work proposed in the buffer zone to the IVW at this site. More specifically, 19 native plantings would be installed in the 50-foot buffer zone, including northern bayberry and staghorn sumac. At the southern end of the site, we propose to install down this area here, 41 native plantings, including a combination of Virginia rose and pitch pine, white oak, American holly, staghorn sumac, and northern bayberry. And then at the infiltration basin, at this location here, we propose to install another 31 native plantings using a combination of the same native species. The balance of the restoration plan includes this meadow mix, which we've included that seed prescription in the planting plan as a note to round out the restoration of upland meadow habitat on this site. And then last but not least, the balance of the notice of intent, and I won't go into the weeds with you at this point. It describes the BMPs, the best management practices that will be followed by Eversource during construction. And it includes information demonstrating how the product has been designed to comply with local and state performance standards. So with that, Mr. Chair, thank you for your patience. We're happy to answer whatever questions you might have. I hope I did that in a relatively clear manner. Thank you.
Thank you. Darcy, you met with the Eversource people. Do you have any comment on this?
So I'm not sure if I'm a big fan with the staghorn sumac. I don't know if we had discussed that prior, but that's not on our planting list. So I probably would ask for anything within our buffer zone that to be swapped out with something else.
Sure, that's not a problem, Darcy.
Okay, and then I just have a follow-up question as far as if the commission approves this. I heard you mention about things that Natural Heritage had asked you to use, like little blue stem and things like that. But was that on? Even though they provided the one comment letter dated September 27th, none of those comments are in the letter. Is that because you did a preview with them?
Right, great question, Darcy. So, so we've been working closely with Natural Heritage for years on this project. Finally getting to this point, we've been doing radio telemetry surveys for turtles and state listed plant surveys for years, and we submitted a separate piece of checklist with the Natural Heritage. So they have an application from us that describes some of their things of their interest in that filing. One of the discussions that we had with Natural Heritage and the staff person who's reviewing it, Darcy, is Lauren Glorioso. I don't know if you know Lauren, but she's great to work with. Anyway, Lauren is not opposed to us using some other conservation mix, but to the extent we could use little blue stem as part of our restoration, she thought that would be great. She thought simple was better. Some of the turtle habitat that they're interested in, sparse vegetation is better, sandy areas for nesting, things like that. Little blue stem might be a good fit for that. But to the extent that the commission wants another native seed mix in your jurisdictional areas, that's not going to be an issue for Eversource.
Okay. No, I'm fine with what, they would like to see there. I just wasn't sure when we get to voting in special conditions, if why there might have been separate ones that we're going to have to add, I guess, under the MISA one, like the turtle protection plan. I'm just a little confused how one letter didn't have any conditions, and then there is one that I think we would have to put the special conditions 1 through 4 on.
Right. Good. I think
the MISA.
Yeah, the confusion is, I think Lauren is trying to be as transparent as possible. She sent not only the letter that you need under the Wetlands Protection Act in your bylaw saying it won't have an effect on rare species, she also gave your courtesy copy of her approval under MISA. And the clearance made under MISA, so there is some confusion about that, I think. And a lot of those things don't have anything to do with wetlands or buffer zone. It's a separate issue, but she wanted to let you know that she approved it under that regulation as well.
All right, so we shouldn't have to list them the 1 through 4 under the MISA letter for our special conditions.
No, and I wouldn't, honestly, because those are Lauren, that's natural heritage. You don't want to control those conditions and how that work is done.
All right. Thank you for that clarification. I was
No,
a little
you're
lost
welcome.
there. All right, thanks.
Yeah,
Welcome,
thank you for the clarification. Question from the commissioner. Peter.
So Mike, thank you for the very thorough and professional presentation. I'm intimately familiar with this area, riding an ancient mountain bike along and through here in a preparation that I had to do for an arduous task out in Utah the other month. But one thing that I have noticed, Mike, throughout West Barnstable is that the subsoil is sandy, strewn with some pebbles and small boulders, and often around the base of the existing towers that have been disturbed in part for their construction, the revegetation on this subsoil, which now sits at the top, is fairly limited. And I don't think it's just because of traffic around it. While I certainly admit that turtles do like a sparser vegetation. I presume these are box turtles for their laying of eggs and getting the heat to the surface of that soil. Do you have any alteration to the subsoil to help some of your vegetation make a firm footing?
Great question. Thank you for asking that. The commission can infer what the rare species is. I would disagree with the inference that was made, but due to confidentiality reasons with natural heritage, we really can't be species specific, but we know there's a lot of box turtles on Cape Cod and in this area of the Cape. So the habitat on this right-of-way, and many Eversource right-of-ways, is really valuable habitat for state-listed species. And many of the species on this right-of-way, which include several invertebrates, as well as state-listed plants and turtles, thrive on that early successional, patchy, sandy, gravelly areas of habitat. So you are going to see that in the right of way. Some of it is just because of the growing conditions on the right of way. Some of it is because it's a managed right of way. Some of it is because of the different uses on the right of way. A major portion of the right of way goes to a big piece of conservation land, right? So there's a lot of uses on this right of way. That said, our goal is to restore and stabilize these areas when the work is done. This is a pretty low impactful land disturbance process. But as I mentioned, when we install the transmission line structure foundations, depending on the size of the poles, they will go 15 to 30 feet in the ground. So we're going to have some excess topsoil. We don't want that topsoil to leave the right of way. We want to retain it and use it and use it to not only stabilize the disturbed areas, but to also create a suitable planting medium for the seed. So we're hopeful that through that process, we'll be able to find that sweet spot between stabilizing these areas and also preserving some of that sparse habitat that these animals like.
Thank you, Mike.
You're welcome.
Any other question from Commissioner?
Yeah, quick question.
Yeah, go ahead, John.
Thank you. Mike, I gotta tell you, you sort of boggled my mind going through this as a layman, so thank you for taking it slow and easy. Just one question, and that is, how are you gonna do this? You see construction and then rebuilding in segments, or are you gonna do this entire stretch before you go back and do the replantings, et cetera, et cetera? How are you gonna time the construction process?
Great question, John. Let me take a shot at answering that. And John Garrity, our project manager, speak up if you want to add to what I'm going to start on. So remember, this is 12.5 miles of new construction in Bourne, Sandwich, and in Barnstable. One of the first things that has to happen for this project, John, is we need to relocate the distribution poles that are there now and that are in the way of the new transmission line. So that'll be one of the first activities that occurs. Relocating those poles towards the center of the right of way to create space for the new lines to start being installed. Now, that distribution line relocation work, John, it starts at Route 130 in Sandwich, just when you get out of Joint Base Cape Cod. Everything back from Route 130 inside Joint Base Cape Cod, we don't have distribution poles. So it's likely that there'll be a work spread starting at Joint Base Cape Cod, while the distribution line work is starting in Sandwich and working its way through Barnstable. At some point in that process, the transmission line crews will come in and start working on their foundations and building those structures. Some of the work pads are going to be repurposed for those different activities as those come out, and depending on the time of year, John. So let's say we're in the growing season and conditions are ripe. We'll start restoring those as soon as we're confident we're out of those areas. In other locations, we probably have to wait for the growing season to kick in to do the full restoration. But it'll be that kind of sequencing and segmenting throughout the project. And John Garrity, remind me again, what are we thinking for total duration of construction? 12 to 18 months, is that about right?
Yeah, it's like about 12 to 18 months for distribution and also for the transmission. Distribution will start first. We'll get that out of the way. And then the transmission will follow after the distribution is moved. Transmission, like you said, will start up near Joint Base Cape Cod first. That'll be working. And so, yeah, 12, 18 months, maybe a little longer depending on weather.
And to John's question, John G, what about the West Barnstable substation work? When in the sequence?
I'd like to focus on that part of it too, please.
Absolutely. Yep. So why don't we segue to that? John, when would West Barnstable substation construction start, ideally?
Well, that's not going to start until we have the EFSB approval. So that will probably be most likely to start in the first quarter of 2024, right in that time frame, Michael.
And the duration of
time? The time of disturbance between when you begin that and when you do the restoration planning that you've got proposed.
Work will probably take, I'm guessing, around 6 months, and then as soon as we're finished with the work, we'll start restoring.
Okay, then the question from an environmental point of view is that 6 months going to present an issue in terms of what happens during those 6 months, rainstorms, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera.
I can take a crack at that too, John. Let me see if I understand your question correctly. Your question is, how do we ensure that the work is occurring in a way that does not impact the wetlands, right, during that construction period?
During that construction period, when there is destruction before you start doing the planning and the mitigation.
Got it. Right. So Eversource requires a pretty robust and comprehensive environmental inspector program. They will hire someone like Epsilon, qualified personnel to be on site throughout the duration of construction to monitor the work. We're going to get coverage under the NIPD's construction general permit. There'll be a SWIP that we're going to adhere to. There's reporting that we do. All that is going on throughout construction up and until the site is stabilized and we've closed out the environmental permits that we received for the project. So that monitoring is constantly occurring throughout construction.
So then I assume if that monitoring indicates disturbance due to weather conditions and the time lapse between destruction and construction, I assume steps will be taken to mitigate any danger or damage that's happening.
Absolutely.
And the environmental company is responsible for doing that or making sure it gets done.
Correct.
Okay, super. Thank you. Thank you.
You're welcome, John. John Garrett, did you want to say something to that too? Did I cut you off?
You did, Michael. Yeah, the inspections are done at least weekly and even more frequently if there's a significant amount of rain or storm comes through. And the project manager talks directly with the company that's doing the inspections and immediately goes to the construction firm to restore any conditions that gets identified as needing to be corrected.
And is there a process where Darcy would be, where Conservation Division would be notified of that?
That's exactly my question, John.
Yeah.
Great minds, George. Great minds.
Yeah, Matt, I'll let you speak up too.
You're taking it out of my mind too.
we are, that is a pretty standard condition in the projects we get for transmission lines, and we routinely coordinate with the conservation staff, and we'd be happy to do that here too. We want to make sure this project goes well. We want to do a good job in the town, and we would work closely with Darcy. Absolutely.
So it would be important then to have a condition in the end that where there's such a situation where it arises from concern from your environmental monitoring company, that notification is given to the conservation staff.
It's not a problem, sir.
Great, thank you.
And
George,
I also had,
just 1 minute, George. You have any other questions?
Yeah, no, that was it. John and I had great minds think alike, Jack. No, it's exactly what I was going to say, and I'm glad that we're going to be notified in case there's anything that we should know. Thank you.
Yeah, but especially it's like almost like a 2 years out in terms of the construction of the substation.
Yeah, exactly.
Darcy,
yeah, and then my question had to do with the yellow gates, because in West Barnstable, a lot of those gates, we have horseshoe pin, one's conservation lock, and one we try to get locked with N-Star, and you have different contractors going in and out, and they leave the gates open, and everybody comes and complains to us about it. So if I need all the information on who is the person in charge of gates and follow up locks on the gates, and if it doesn't get locked, who we can call. So
John Garrity, I assume that's like a workable issue for us to figure out.
That's easy. The construction supervisor will be able to do that, Michael. That'd be Mike Morrissey right now, but whoever has that position can do that.
okay, thank you. Yeah, so we
Oh,
want to.
yeah, that's a matter of just coordinating, all the access key and so forth.
Yep. That's
One
not a
question
problem.
I have, though, a couple of questions actually. On the Oak Street substation, what are you proposing in that square, in the rectangular box in there? Is there any other, transformer and that sort of things in there?
Jim Curtis, you still in the call? Did I lose Jim?
Yeah, I'm on.
Hey, Jim, the question from the chairman was, what is the type of equipment that will be installed in the fence line at the substation expansion area at West Barnstable?
Yeah, for the most part, it'll be the rigid bus, electrical conductors, which run in triplicate. And it'll be, if you consider that strip a bay, that we call it a bay, it'll be pretty much a replication of the one that's alongside the fence right now. So it'll be the support structures and a couple of breakers and the dead end structure that the transmission line will come into. So very, very similar to what's there already. It's just like a copy and paste of the equipment next to it.
So there is no additional transformer that you need to put in there?
No, this project doesn't need a additional transformer.
Okay.
It's all switching equipment.
Okay, thanks. Oh, the other question too, you mentioned about the retaining wall. How high is that retaining wall? Just curious.
Rich, do you recall the height of the wall? Rich Lewis?
It's got a max height of 42 inches. And that was to eliminate fall protection.
Okay.
3.5 feet.
Yeah, and that's only in the southwest corner. It's for a very small length. For short length.
Okay.
Thank you, Rich.
Any other question from the commissioner? Channel 18, any public comment on this?
Seeing none.
None? Could I have a motion? I'm trying this. If I miss anything, just let me know, Darcy and John. Could I have a motion to approve this project subject to a couple of conditions? One is to notify the conservation divisions when the construction starts and coordinate about the access key to the gate. That's why.
Swap out the SMAC.
Yes, swap the SUMET in consultations with the conservation administrator.
Yep.
And then, Darcy, do you need the revised plan there?
Instead of doing a whole revised plan,
No, just the
I
plan.
would take it. Yeah, I would take it's such a small thing to have them change that whole planting plan out. So I would just take an email that's what they're going to swap that out with. Well, actually, no, we should have it revised. Yeah, we should. Revised.
Just the planting plan itself.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's not a problem, actually. Yeah, that makes it easier for you. We'll have a record plan, and then we'll have it in the field 2 years from now. So we're happy to do that.
So there'll just be one instead of me listing all of the sheet numbers, it would just be one sheet number. It would have a different plan revision date on it. Thank you.
Tom, do you need something in there? You already covered that. Where their environmental monitoring firm detects any concerns, conservation division will be notified immediately.
Yes, at that in
Thank
there.
you.
Yep. Do I say anything else?
So moved.
Second.
Roll call.
Abadili?
Aye.
Foster?
Aye.
Gilmore, aye. Byrne?
Aye.
Lee?
Aye.
Moran?
Aye.
Sampo?
Aye.
That's unanimous.
Thank you. Good luck.
Mr. Chair, can I just
Great job. Great job, Mike.
Thank you, John. I appreciate that. If I could just make one more comment, just a shout out for the commission staff. I just want you to know, I know you already know this, but Kim and Darcy are extremely professional and they're very patient with me and my gazillion emails, just trying to make sure that we did everything right as a team to get a complete notice of intent in front of you. So I thank both of them for their patience and guidance. And we look forward to doing a good job in this project for you. And we'll see you guys down the road. Thank you for that.
Thank you. Best
Way
in
to
the
go,
state of
Darcy and
Massachusetts.
Kim.
You do. Talented. Have a good one, folks.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And then we have one amended order on Restoration LLCs to modify our treatments, timing, and approach in Parker Pond at 379 Parker Road, Barnstable, as long as the assessors map 115, parcel 022. And this is a continuance from September the 27th, and the quorum is everyone's. Peter.
Yes. There.
Peter, right?
Yep. Do you see me?
Gotcha.
I did not see if I can see you on the list.
You're there.
And Matt, well.
Yes, we have Matt with us as well.
Talk your proposed amended order. Here.
Or Matt.
Sorry, can you ask the question again, please?
Who's doing the presentation of talk about your project? It's Matt?
That'll be Matt, yes.
Okay. Matt, the floor is yours.
Great. Yeah, I guess, you know, basically had a question before the commission at the last hearing regarding the change to one of the special conditions in the original order to allow the implementation of an alum treatment starting this fall. And then we did ask that the commission allow us to also, split the dose into more than one treatment so that we can more effectively treat this pond because of the nature of the phosphorus in the sediments. And so we were requesting up to 3 alum treatments as part of a split dose approach. And that's
I
really
think that was the
only
only
change.
question, wasn't it, Matt? That was the only issue that was left open.
Correct.
Okay.
So with that, I have invited, Garcia and I have invited Amber from the DBW to help us to review these applications in terms of the low dose, or different dose of the alums. And I think we feel like we don't have that expertise to do that kind of review in terms of what is the environmental effect is to the pond and the different dosing period and the monitoring frequency wise. So what we're saying is that we want to have a, when you apply for the DEP, you would need to provide us with a DEP approval letter regarding to the approved alum dose and its frequency. And secondly, before you're doing the alum treatment, we would like to get a copy of a letter review report from Ken Wagner in terms of looking at your application protocol, including the dosage and the monitoring frequency, so that we are comfortable with it. And then that letter has to be sent to Conservation Administrator for review and approval. Those are the major ones. And then we are talking about, maybe a protocol for truck and trailer access to the pond and treatment boats and the monitoring boat access. And if there's any damage or impact to the buffer access wise, then you need to restore the area. So those are the things that we discussed with Amber and Marcy and come up with pretty much the special conditions. And obviously there is one special condition that we have been circulating around between the applicant and Darcy and Amber and myself is the special condition 17. What it reads is, if alum is deployed, the deployment will be paid for by the applicant, and there will be monitoring of the total phosphorus, total nitrogens, dissolved oxygens, such as depths, alkalinity, and pH immediately before and immediately after treatment. During treatment, the applicant will conduct the following monitoring. A, the vertical profile of pH measurement at 3-foot intervals every 15 minutes for the first 2 hours of active treatment on the first day of each treatment event. If pH does not deviate from the preferred range of 6.0 to 8.0, monitoring frequency may be reduced to 4 times per day. If pH level deviates from this preferred range, monitoring must continue every 15 minutes, and the applicator must make any required adjustment to the buffer ratios to maintain pH within this range. Once pH has stabilized within this range for at least 2 hours, monitoring frequency may be decreased to 4 times per day. B, visual monitoring to ensure that aquatic life are not negatively impacted by the alum treatment. If impacts are observed over the course of the treatment, the applicator will stop work, verify that all tanks, hoses, nozzles, and other appurtenances of the application system are correctly operating and are not clogged or otherwise impaired. Prior to initiating of treatments, a vertical profile of pH measurements must be collected. The applicator will be responsible for adjusting the buffer ratios based on these results. In addition, the applicant will perform the monitoring outline in special condition 11 and 13 for 1 year following each alum treatments. This data will be provided in the spreadsheet forms in 2024. Do you have any question on this one?
My hand is up.
Oh, Louise?
You don't need to tell me go into detail, but where are you, just generally, where are you making the pH measurements? Is it at the applicator? Is it along the shore? Where are you measuring?
Yeah, it would be in a deeper part of the pond, so probably towards the center of the pond, where we'd be able to get the full profile of the water chemistry.
Okay.
And then you're following the operator to check the pH, if I'm right.
Yeah, this is a small pond, but we don't really think that, you know, we can, but we won't be moving around much because it's so small. But we'll spend most of our time somewhere in the deeper water, you know, regardless. Yeah.
Then you're going to be mixing everything. It's not that you put it in one spot and you measure in another. It's all going to be mixed, right?
Well, we'll have background readings before they even get started as well. So we'll be able to sort of compare in and outside of the treatment zone. But because it's such a small pond, yeah, it will be effectively the whole pond will be part of the treatment zone, even though we're only actively applying below the 5-foot contour in the pond. So effectively speaking, yes, we'll be able to sort of, the treatment will be mixing very effectively, and we do anticipate being able to pick up any sort of pH deviations anywhere in the pond.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Any other questions from the commissioner?
I just have a question. So I know we talked about you know, we would be okay, the commission, I guess, would be okay with the letter coming from Dr. Ken Wagner. I guess you're saying, you know, you would be issuing the amended order with the change to special condition number 17 and adding A and B. But what would happen if Dr. Ken Wagner came up with something that would be changing A and B? Would they have to agree to, no matter what he says, that they're in agreement to that? I just started thinking about this when I was driving home, that if we're just saying, go ahead, Darcy, issue the amended order, and then we'll just take the letter from Dr. Ken Wagner, and then he says he thinks something needs to be changed in A and B, or some different type of monitoring or additional monitoring. How is that going to work?
So in the special condition that I was just read that during the discussion here is, you know, Ken Wagner will provide your review letter to you for the review and the approval. If there's any change that he recommended in terms of the frequency wise, then you can change it as part of the amended order.
Okay, so I'm holding the amended order until he finishes up at the review.
Right. Right.
Okay, because what I thought you and I talked about was like prior to start of work. So I was thinking that I was supposed to issue the amended order and just wait for that letter. Like they have the amended order, and then we just state that had come in prior to work. So no, now I understand. I am holding the amended order until Ken Wagner's review comes in.
Right.
And whatever recommendation he has,
right,
that is what we're going with.
Right.
As long as everybody understands that. Okay, thank you for the clarification.
Any other questions?
I was going to offer to provide clarification of one point, and the commission may already be aware, but the DEP permit that was referenced earlier, that can't be issued until we have the order of conditions to submit to apply for that. So the herbicide contractor or the application contractor, right, would need that before they're able to get that. But then that could be provided once we actually have that in hand to the commission.
Yeah.
Just want to make sure that chicken and the egg.
Oh,
weren't getting to the situation.
It's chicken and egg, which comes first. Is there any other comments or question from the commissioner? None. 10:18. Any public comment on this?
Seeing none.
None. Could I have a motion to approve this amended order subject to the following? read into the record of the special condition 17th. And the 4 that I mentioned it is a protocol for the truck and trailer treatment boat and monitoring boat access, a restoration to restore the area if there is any impacts on the buffer zone in terms of access to pond, and then provide a copy of the DP approval letter after you get it for regarding to the approved album dose and the frequency, and then provide a written letter from Dr. Ken Wagner, in terms of reviewing the application protocol, including the dosage and monitoring to the conservation administrator for review and approval. Then you can release the amended order.
So moved, Tom.
Second.
Roll call.
Hearn,
Aye.
Gilmore, aye. Foster,
Aye.
Lee.
Aye.
Abadili,
Aye.
Sampo,
Aye.
Moran.
Aye.
That is unanimous.
Thank you. Good luck.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
We have one item under the advisements. Pamela Randon, construction of a pile sonotube support boathouse with radar services, access ramps, modified pedestrians access path at 117 Eel River Road, Oswego, as shown on the assessors map 116 Parcel 097. This is a continuance. We're taking this under the advisements from October the 4th. Over the weekend, I take, the quorum is everyone except Luis, because Peter has more than rule in, and we can only have one more than rule applied to one commissioner. So over the weekend, I kind of take a second look on the whole applications and the information for 265 Sevier Road and 50 Fox Island. And I compare the function for each of the boathouse or both of the 3 applications. They all pretty much the same as far as as far as I'm concerned. Looking at that, they all talking about a storage for the boat accessory and equipment storage. So if we approve the 2 application beforehand, 265 Superior Road and 50 Fox Island, it would be very difficult to kind of say, well, we are going to deny the third one. And I think, but the only problem that I have is the naming of the structure. I think, a proper name would be maybe a boat accessory and the equipment storage structures rather than the boathouse. I think that may help to resolve that. So what I mean, our definition under Chapter 704 is not a good one for the water-dependent structures. So what I'm saying is that, I would do a finding that the commissioner find that the boat accessory and the equipment storage structure is a water-dependent structures. That's my finding. So, Bill?
Yeah, I hear you, Tom, when you say that there were 2 previous findings that found that it was a water-dependent structure. In the last meeting, I went to it naively, and I thought, what difference does it make on a water-dependent structure? It's 0 to 50. I was like, yeah, so I'm going to mess up the 0 to 50. But I turn out to be naive, foolish. I don't know. So I looked at the definition of water-dependent facility. I would just like to be able to explain my interpretation of that. Looking at 704.2F, where they define a water-dependent facility, it's very easy to be led through prejudice or bias or what have you. Well, it's a boathouse. Gee, it's a boathouse. Well, it's got to be water-dependent. It's got to be water-dependent. Hey, we've even approved them before. However, I would maintain that there are 4 words in our definition that are very important. 4 words are, quote, that must be located, unquote. That must be located. Now, let me please read the definition of the water dependent facility. It says, is any structure or works associated with water dependent industrial, maritime, blah, blah, fisheries. Yes, it is something associated with recreational fisheries activities. Yeah, absolutely. Wow, okay. But it says that must be located at or near the shoreline. And I was thinking of Peter's comments that he put in writing prior to the meeting. And he said, well, I have a shed and it has boats in it and whatnot. And it made me think about that must be located. Now, we saw a picture of this boathouse / shed, put a boat in. And what if it were moved 30 feet back? Could you put the boat in it? Yes. What if it was 50 feet back? Could you put the boat in it? Yes. So does this shed, that must be located at or near the shoreline? I would contend that the operative words in our definition are that must be located. It doesn't have to be located. Indeed, it could be at least 50 feet or 100 feet back. That there is a means to move the boat to some other location. I believe that we have been willingly, and I wasn't there for the original 2 votes, but going, well, boathouse, yes, it's water dependent. But the operative words are that must be located. I do not believe, I know that there could be that shed, as we saw. Arlene had a picture of it. She said, well, this isn't it exactly, but it's kind of like that. It's a shed, and it's going to have a boat in it. It does not, it's not a that must be located. It could be moved back. So I would contend that this proposed boathouse is not a water dependent facility. Thank you.
Thanks, Bill. Larry?
Thank you. It looks to me like there's a trio or quartet of us that have done some thinking in the last week. And I have done that too. I have approached the definition of 704-2 as much of the way Bill has done it, except I've taken a completely different point of view. There is, and Tom, you did mention the fact that there are some, let's call it conceptual gaps in some of these regulatory definitions. The word boathouse is really something that is sort of, it's got a little nostalgia associated with it, but it clearly is not part of this definition literally. So if we're back to what is a water dependent facility, that's a pretty versatile term. My feeling is that the definition, I had 5 elements to it: associated with water, dependent, recreational, must be located at or near the shoreline, and within the 100-foot buffer. So Bill's argument has some credibility to the extent that it doesn't have to be right up against the shoreline, but it can be within the 100-foot buffer. But in this particular case, there are reasons why this particular applicant has requested that it be located where it is. Now, the recreational is, I don't think anybody is disputing that amongst ourselves. By that, I mean, this is for a private pier on which a sailboat is tied up to periodically. It's for recreational use. It's not commercial or some other similar use. And looking at the overall examples under the definition, I interpreted that once upon a time when this was enacted, and John Abadili, you may have a better history on this, but it seems that this definition came into being to deal with more commercial properties or some other things that are beyond the private uses that we wrestle with. The second section, however, of the regulation, 704-6, deals with the applicability of all of the provisions under 704 as dealing with construction of water-dependent facilities as defined under 704. Now, that kind of is a very circuitous route and method by which these definitions are traced. But my feeling is that the evidence isn't the right word. The description of the project fits these elements closely enough that we need to consider that carefully. There is nothing, in the way I interpret this regulation, there's nothing that precludes anything. The question is, does the application meet the different requirements rather than does it say you can't get it unless you do this? It doesn't say that. The other aspect of it is there's three other issues that I think deserve attention. One is that several of the objections have been raising the risk of adverse precedent. Now that term is raised. There's nothing in the regulations to talk about precedent. So, but there's this fear that somehow there's going to be what I underlined as a boathouse overrun. I don't see any basis for that. The information presented that Darcy extracted from our records, every single one of those examples showed an approval. I wasn't aware of any disapprovals. And the ones that Arlene presented last week were scattered over a period of time, upwards of maybe 30 or more years. So there have been a fair number of boathouses or storage facilities, whatever you want to call them, but I don't see enough reason that there's going to be a precedent issue for us to deal with. The critical tipping issue then at that point comes up with the fact that one of the commissioners, I don't need to name him, we know who he is, mentioned the arbitrary and capricious decisions. This to me was, if we were to vote against this, based upon all these elements in the application and in the definitions, we would be setting up a very nice appeal for the applicant to have it reversed on grounds of arbitrary and capricious. That's my opinion. The other point that I think we need to do is to recognize that I want to look at my note here. Oh, there were questions whether there were other conditions that could be applied to this. The question came up about elevations. They're not required, but they were offered. Vegetation. This particular area is very minimally vegetated. It's got beach grass and that sort of thing, but there's no existing shrubs or trees there. There's nothing that we customarily value as being indicative of protection of the resource area within the 0 to 50. The concept of suggested alternatives were raised and refuted, or not really pressured. Seasonal versus winter storage. I think John Abadili said, really doesn't matter which they are. There's nothing in the regulation that covers that. The presence and precise location will have a significant adverse impact. Vision and vista is not what a significant impact would be. And the last one is cumulative of impact. I don't know exactly how we apply cumulative impact here, but I don't see any basis for that. So what I'm doing is saying that we have vetted this issue and discussed it remarkably thoroughly, and I respect all the different views that we've considered, but I'm totally in favor of it as filed, and I recommend that it be approved. Thank you.
Luis?
Let's see, I cannot vote, but I can speak to what I think are some of the issues. In watching the tape from the hearing that I missed, you folks all voted, you answered the question yes or no. You didn't really vote. You gave your feeling, I guess, to Chairman Lee, which led to taking us under advisement. And I believe the question Chairman Lee asked was, do you believe this is a water dependent structure? Am I correct, Chairman Lee? The question asked?
That was the question.
Right. So at that point, everything kind of rested on that issue. Is it a water dependent structure? But I contend that this is only part of the question about whether or not this project ought to be approved. 704-6 under A says, this regulation should not be construed to preclude, and I emphasize preclude, the following activities, any of which may be permitted at the Commission's discretion. I emphasize discretion, and without accompanying requirement for mitigation planting. So, preclude means that there is the option of factoring other elements into the discussion and decision. And it seems as if the decision to proceed to this level really had everything to do with whether or not this is a water dependent structure. Now, Pete made the case that his shed in West Barnstable was a boathouse. Arlene very eloquently, much more concisely than I can, explained why she felt that Pete's shed was not a water dependent structure and that what is being proposed is. And that had to do with the fact that the applicant would be actively, I believe this is the sense of what she said, would be actively using a vessel underwater, which then needed to get transferred immediately into this proposed boathouse. I have a question about whether or not that is actually feasible. Arlene made the case in saying that this structure had to be where she is proposing it be placed, based on the fact that it is very heavy, it's very cumbersome. It weighs, the hull only itself weighs 132 pounds, I believe she said. This is without the mast. This is without, accessories, probably the tiller, the rudder, stuff that goes inside the boat, the sails, all of that. She even said that it takes 4 strong teenage boys to lug it around. So I have a question about whether or not this is actually going to serve purpose that it's being designed for. I have trouble imagining how someone who has limited mobility, etc., is going to get that boat up even over the grading that is going to level the surface of the beach, up a ramp and into this structure. So I kind of have it, based on what Arlene has described as why this is a water dependent structure and Pete's shed is not, and what we've been told about why the structure is needed. I have a question about, is it going to function at all in terms of allowing this the applicant to continue sailing. So, I think that we need to kind of think about the functionality of the proposal, and also thinking about beyond, is it a water dependent structure? It's because if we decide it is a water dependent structure, that isn't the bottom line. The question is now, given that we think it is, if we think it is, what do we, how do we feel about approving it? It's right at the edge of the resource area. As Bill said, could it be moved back? So although I can't vote, I wanted to make my concerns known. Thank you.
Thank you, Louise. Pete?
Yeah, thank you for the time. I'm a bit surprised by Commissioner Moran's dismissal of some very important facts. One, that this is not precedent setting. Many of us here on the commission, roughly maybe not quite half, since Louise is can't vote, but she seems to think that this might not be a water dependent facility, that in fact we seem to be being bound by a precedent of 2 previous decisions. I myself have made decisions that were incorrect in the past. I don't know what the vote was on the previous, quote, 2 boathouses, whether you were unanimous or not, but upon close reflection of this, if I did vote that a very similar structure within our 0 to 50 was okay and a water dependent for the storage of boating paraphernalia or boats themselves, I would admit that I made a mistake. That has stood in the court of law, the admission of a mistake. Secondly, Mr. Moran said that in fact there would be essentially no negative impacts. Well, we actually have part of our buffer zone here now over which a light impervious structure will sit. So there will be no vegetation underneath that. All of us, of course, on our commission realize that vegetation have the capacity to uptake nutrients and ameliorate pollutants that are draining from the uphill side. So I don't see that as very valued thought. The tracks going up from the water will, of course, impact the vegetation there as well. So clearly there will be vegetation effects. A question actually that I would, that Bill brought up, and I'm asking my lawyer friends to really consider those 4 words. Must this structure to provide the goal of the applicant, the storage of her boat, must this be where it is? Could it be, as Commissioner Hearn said, a little bit further away? We were hoping that the applicant would perhaps consider a little bit further away outside of our application zone, outside of our zone of regulatory control. Finally, and this is something I want all my commissioners to hear, and I've not mentioned it before. If this is being considered by some a boathouse for the storage of a boat, and so therefore water dependent, which of course I disagree with, is that in perpetuity? If this laser is no longer owned at that property, is the structure going to be removed? Or will this structure remain there? Because once it's built, it's going to remain. I think that we have an arbitrary and capricious decision based upon the fact that this structure, for its purpose, does not have to be where it is absolutely located. So someone else who disagrees with a finding that we will allow this structure within our buffer zone could appeal it. And I think there is sound legal basis to say that those key words, that this structure must be located at or near the shoreline within our 100-foot buffer zone. The purpose of this structure is to store a boat. And no, it does not have to be right next to the shoreline. It's got to be wheeled up from the shore as it is. It could easily be moved a little bit further away. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you, Pete.
I'd like to address a few things that Larry said, but before I do, I just have to one paid political advertisement. It is all about that must be located, a structure that must be located. In the definition, it actually refers specifically at the end of the definition. It refers to examples of water-dependent facilities include ports, marinas, community piers, public beaches. Those are commercial, and that's a point that Larry made. Yeah, it doesn't say anything about boathouses. In terms of a precedent, I go back to the thing that Pete said at the last meeting. You know, if we decide that this is a water dependent, imagine other recreational or fisheries activities that have to do with water stuff. Well, fishing has, we want to store our bait, we want to store our tackle, we want to store what have you, or other water related, our kayaks or whatever. If it's water related, well, then we can put that shed there. And I feel like there really is a potential for precedent. I mean, I think, and I'm concerned about that. For arbitrary and capricious, Larry alluded to, I brought it up because I was saying we really can't deal with cumulative impacts because it would be arbitrary. What's a cumulative impact? We have absolutely no definition, and that was all that was about. As far as appeal goes, Pete just made the point. I'll reiterate it. I can imagine at some point someone ends up putting something here, or even a neighbor or somebody else who's not like this particular project. They could say, "Wait a minute, this group is calling this a water dependent facility, and they're doing it without any mitigation. But indeed, it doesn't have to be there. It must not." I feel like we're setting ourselves up to a potential appeal, either on this project or some other project, where we're hanging out. And finally, the last point, and that is that, once built, this sucker is going to be grandfathered. And that just doesn't seem right. And I don't know. This project does not have to be located there. Thank you.
Bill, Larry.
This is a fantastic discussion, and I compliment all of you for your thoughts, every one of you. I want to distinguish a couple of things. First of all, under 704-2, I broke down 5 different elements of that definition. Bill focused on the must be located as the principal one. I don't think there's any basis for necessarily isolating or priority in any particular one of those elements. That's part of it, but I think they all need to be considered together. It doesn't mean if there's 5, that each one of them is 20% of the decision. But I'm thinking that you can talk about, some people can argue for must be located as critical. Others might simply say associated with water is most critical. So that's my first comment. But the other matter that I think Louise brought up, and I have it in my own notes, is that the regulation really doesn't have the language that precludes things. It's more whether it's going to meet a requirement and be permitted, but it never says anything about not permitting it. Some of the regulations do have a spin or twist leaning towards non-approval, but I'm just saying in this particular case, I don't see that. The other matter that was raised right at the end a few minutes ago dealt with mitigation, and the fact that this specifically says that required mitigation plantings, the mitigation plantings are not going to be required, has no regard to the 0 to 50. I'm sympathetic to Bill and Pete's position as to the 0 to 50. I'm respective of the fact that John Amadili brought up and opened the door to having some plants put in there, some other positive things that Arlene indicated, at least subject to Pam Rendon's approval, that would be possible. The other matter, the final matter, however, deals with precedent. And the issue with precedent can be the same. You can sing the Star Spangled Banner one way or another, depending on how you'd like to present it. In this particular case, precedent can be used to stop something, or precedent can be used to justify its decision. I'm not advocating either one. I'm just saying that in this particular case, those that have raised the issue of precedent, there's no inventory, there's no number, a measurable number of how many structures of this sort have been created over the years. Many areas are devoid of those kinds of structures. But I think that the concern dealing with arbitrary and capricious simply means to me that if the findings were, the way findings are written is critical, because if they say certain things that don't incorporate some of the things we've talked about, that can open the door to making it be vulnerable on appeal. So otherwise, I think we've got a great discussion going here. We don't get to do this very often, so I want to thank you and congratulate all of you.
Thank you, Larry. John?
Thanks, Tom. Wow, guys. I keep going back and forth. As far as precedent goes, and I'm sure everybody knows this, I mean, the Supreme Court can overrule 50 years of abortion rulings and Roe v. Wade, then I guess we have the authority to overrule earlier decisions, clearly, and just we need to have specific reasons for doing so. So that's where I come on that. I look at this in terms of, I think there is a difference between Bill's storage of, fishing rods and fishing gear from the specifics of this situation. And that's sort of what's been missing in the conversation. What are the specific issues in this specific application? We are talking about a heavy boat, the 130 pounds that has to be stored. We're talking about evidence submitted by Arlene, or testimony submitted by Arlene, relative to alternative ways of transporting the boat. We're talking about a proposal. We're talking about the environmental impact. The specific environment here, Peter, is pretty well devoid right now without anything growing there or building there. The area she's talking about is devoid of anything. We're talking about a condition that, if it's approved, we would require a like amount of mitigation plantings in that area, equivalent in square footage to what this building would be. Where, in terms of Bill, your issue of, gee, if it's there, it's there forever. As you know, we specify a certain boat on a dock under the new regulations. And if that boat changed, you got to come back to the commission. We can clearly condition this thing that if there's an ownership change, if there's a boat change of any sort, it has to come back to the commission, and removal would be required unless otherwise approved. So we could put that condition in kind of the sunset clause that we've done in other cases. So I think we need to look at those specifics. I am utterly confused when I hear Larry and Louise and you guys talk about definition of water dependent facility. I think it's clear that if the guy had a little 10-foot rowboat, it's not water dependent. I think where Arlene presents evidence, given this particular boat in this particular situation, one can make a very solid argument that it is water dependent, and must therefore be located within the protected zones. So I guess where I am is on the one hand and on the other hand. That's why the lawyers have two hands. I can't quite figure it out where I'm going to go on this one. But I do think we need to clarify a couple of things. I think we need to look at this as site specific. I think that if it's approved, it's got to be done with a grandfather clause and a condition. I think if it's approved, it's going to be done with the fact that where it's being located is not now showing a lot of growth and a lot of protection that we want in the 0 to 50, and that we will be getting more benefit by an equivalent amount of plantings within the 0 to 50. So that's where I am, somewhere in between the left hand and the right hand.
The other things too, just to reiterate, I think last time when we were discussing this, Aline was offering some vegetations. I think it's equal footage about the boat or about these storage accessory building stuff. The other things that in the other boat storage stuff, we always kind of mentioning that it cannot be used for any other living space or bathroom or bedroom, that type of structures. This is only a accessory and a storage building, and whether we include any sunset clause in terms of the boat, I mean, we can look at that too. But at the end of the day, if we are denying this, I think there's a problem in terms of the appeal, and that we will lose easily. So that's my comment.
Yeah, actually, Abo, on the one hand and then the other hand.
That's why lawyers always have two hands.
So being somewhere in the middle, I brought up my worry about long-term presence there, but your motion, well, not quite a motion yet, but your comment as to it exists at this point in time for this boat, and that in the event that this boat no longer exists, or a boat at the dock that could use this no longer exists, then it would be removed, is a very interesting addition to our discussion. Thank you, John.
Okay, Pete, you're welcome.
Luis?
If we were talking about a project in the 0 to 50 foot buffer, we would be talking about 4-to-1 mitigation, would we not? So why are we talking about 1-to-1?
Because the regulation specifically says no mitigation is required.
I know, but we're considering 1-to-1.
No, we're being offered 1-to-1.
Well, could we be offered 4-to-1?
Could be offered 2-to-1, 10-to-1. The offer is 1-to-1. The offer is 1-to-1 and the record's closed. That's the problem, Louise. Excuse me for interrupting, Louise. I apologize. I shouldn't have interrupted you.
No, I was yelling at the TV set. 4-to-1.
Well, I kind of do the finding. Let's vote on the finding, and then we can put some conditions on the approval. So let me
approve it.
Huh? Yeah. Well, assuming, depending on that findings of if it turns out, then we may have to do something with it. So I just want to mention again, so we are finding that this accessory and the equipment storage structure is a water dependent structure. So
excuse me, Tom.
Yeah, go ahead.
Can I interject?
Yeah.
I would have trouble with that finding. I would not have trouble if there is a specific finding that we find under the unique circumstances of this particular application, it is a water dependent structure. I think that is a critical difference, because that addresses some of Bill's legitimate concerns about, Larry, you denied cumulative impact, but the law says cumulative impact. We deny about that. It also provides a basis, if we otherwise approved it, to say this can be a grandfather clause. So that's why I don't think the motion should be that this is a water dependent facility. I think it's going to be a motion's water dependent facility under the unique set of facts facts presented in this case. But that's my suggestion, Thomas.
I agree with that, John. I mean, I have no trouble with that. I mean, just want we can go back and forth, but I guess Tom, you probably want to try to lay out the findings, or maybe John Abadili should do it. I think that okay, you don't want to do it. Okay.
No, whatever Tom wants.
No, understand. Anyway.
No, well, let me try it, and then if it doesn't sound right, then you can just correct it. And the commission find that under these circumstances with these applications, we find that this boathouse accessories and the equipment storage structure is a water-dependent structures.
I would support that. I would make a motion. I think that's well said.
I'll second it.
Roll call.
Abadili?
Aye.
Gilmore, aye. Hearn?
No.
Lee?
Aye.
Moore?
Did you ask for me, George?
I got.
I'm sorry.
Yes, Moore, and I'm sorry. Yes.
That's okay. Yes.
Sambu?
Abstain.
That motion carries, Mr. Chairman.
Right, I have a motions to approve this project subject to the receipt of a revised plan showing this is a boat accessory structures, and with the mitigation area that offer of the equal square footage of the boathouse, and the structure will be limited for boat accessory and equipment storage only, and it cannot be used for living space, bedrooms, and the bathrooms. And if there is any change in terms of the boat, it should come back to the commissions, or if there is no need of the boat, then the house or this accessory structures and equipment storage structure will be removed.
Can I ask a clarifying question?
Yes, yes.
10 years in the future, how do we know what's inside that shed? Who's the policing of this? When do we look at this grandfathered clause that Commissioner Abadili suggested? How do we know?
I think, Peter, if I can jump in, Tom, I'm sorry.
Yeah.
Yes, please do.
I worry about the same question when we have a dock issue and we say, okay, it's got this boat with this draft, and we specify that under the new regs. We've been lucky because natural resources, the harbor master has policed that for us, and we've been notified by them. Maybe it's a neighbor. Historically, what I have found, to my pleasant surprise, is that we generally get notified by the harbor master or by natural resources, and I deal with the harbor masters who come by my house all of the time asking them to be aware of these things. So, is that a guarantee that we'll ever find out, Pete? Absolutely not. But that's the best answer I could come up with.
What we often do with our peers is we have a posted sign as to that specific boat there. Would we want a sign on this structure saying what's inside of it?
I think that's a great idea.
I can add that as part of this, motion, is to add a sign with showing the name of the boat in front of the shed.
The type of boat, not the name of it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And we can help put that together, type in the name, whatever it is. I think that's a very good idea, Peter.
Yeah. Nancy, you got a question?
Yeah, and no storage of fuel.
No storage. Yep.
So whoever made the motion, I think George made it. I don't know. Who made the motion? You. Okay, it's an amended motion and George seconded it, right?
Yes.
Okay.
Roll call.
Sambu?
No.
Moran?
Yes.
Lee?
Yes.
Hearn?
No.
Gilmore, yes. Abadili?
Yes.
Motion carries.
Thank you. We have one set of minutes, August the 30th.
Mr. Chairman, I make a motion, we accept the minutes as submitted.
Second.
Roll call.
Abadili,
Aye.
Foster,
Aye.
Hearn,
Aye.
Lee,
Aye.
Warren,
Aye.
Sample,
Aye.
Gilmore, aye, that's unanimous.
Our next hearing is October the 25th. I'll be away from the hearing and Luis will be conducting the next hearing. Could I have a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Second.
Roll call.
Abadili,
Aye.
Foster,
Aye.
Gilmore, aye, Hearn,
Aye.
Lee,
Aye.
Moran,
Aye.
Sample.
Aye.
That is unanimous. We are adjourned at 9:15, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Good night.
Good night, everyone.
Thanks, everybody.